The Cats are looking for any boost they can get on the recruiting trail, and hiring Jamal Crawford could completely change the future of Kentucky basketball.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of the show, we're going to talk about how Kam Williams might be a little undervalued now that Milan Momcilovic is on the roster. Pace is everything for the Kentucky Wildcats this upcoming season. If they want to find success, we're going to take a look at last season's numbers to explain why. But first, we need to talk about how Jamal Crawford, if he was to be added to this Kentucky staff, could change the future of Kentucky basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching here live on YouTube, thank you so much for doing so here on this Wednesday afternoon. Just hanging out. Wanted to talk a little hoops with you guys today. A couple of hypothetical things. One thing that is very much so on my mind as far as Kentucky and their personnel and how they decide to play the game this upcoming season. But we'll start here with the news that's been sort of rumbling over the last, half month now at this point. Jamal Crawford possibly joining Kentucky staff. Now, Crawford, in case you don't know, already has a ton of things going on in his life. For instance, his son JJ playing up in Seattle where his family currently resides. He is the head coach of Rainier Beach High School. He just got done calling the Western Conference Finals with NBC. He's got a lot going on. He's got a lot of jobs. He's got his finger in a lot of pies right now. So if he were to potentially up and leave for Lexington, it would take a lot. But it still remains on the table, at least according to reports, that Jamal Crawford could possibly leave all of those things to come join this Kentucky staff, which would be incredible, obviously, for the Cats, but you got to take a lot to get there. We talk a lot already about how good the recruiting for Kentucky in the future could be with Mo Williams on the staff. In fact, we just saw the fruits of that. Ryan Hampton committing on Sunday, top 10 player. Mark Pope's highest rated recruit ever is now a Wildcat. Obviously, he hasn't signed. He's got to get there first, but highest rated recruit he's ever gotten to commit to him. And it's because of Mo Williams. It's already starting to turn that way. Momentum, positive momentum on the recruiting trail after such a poor start to the Mark Pope era when it comes to, adding the actual talent that Kentucky needs to succeed. But you have to sit here and imagine for a second what it would look like, the world that we would have if Jamal Crawford was on this staff alongside Mo Williams. It would be so incredibly easy to attack not just the high school ranks, but the transfer portal ranks. If you had not one, but two stud recruiters on your roster, of course, you could take both of them and focus on one individual player, but you could split them up and you could have them go after two of your most prioritized prospects. Whether, again, that be at the top of this 2027 class with Marcus Spears Jr. or somebody like CJ Rosser, or perhaps it be in the transfer portal next offseason whenever you really need to get one of the best forwards in the game, a Yaxel Lindenberg type, if you will, and you can send somebody like Jamal Crawford after him. Having the versatility in your staff, having the multiple guys to go out there and get who you want would be incredibly valuable. It also is great for Pope because up until this point, again, he has really struggled to produce at the level that Kentucky needs him to when it comes to acquiring talent. Now, obviously, things have sort of changed here over the last several weeks with Kentucky getting Marino to stay, Momcilovic to commit, Ryan Hampton coming. Obviously, it's not all Mo Williams here. Of course, Pope has something to do with it. But this allows Pope to not necessarily go hands-off per se in recruiting, but it definitely allows him to take a step back and let his staff take care of acquiring the talent that Pope needs to succeed here. Because like we've talked about already on the show, getting talent, quote unquote, does not necessarily mean that every player needs to be a 5-star, that every player needs to be at the top of the high school recruiting class, that every player needs to be a one-and-done freshman that Mark Pope goes out and gets. Not every player is going to be like that. right? But it does mean acquiring enough talent, quote unquote, through both high school and the portal and developing your own in order to have a very competitive roster year in and year out. And Kentucky, I think, has over the last couple of seasons lacked the depth at point guard that they need. They've lacked the athleticism that they need, the physicality around the rim that they need in order to be a very successful team in this league and in the country. They've not gotten the personnel that they need, in my opinion, to consistently succeed. And they now have the ability to possibly do that here. If they add somebody like Jamal Crawford, it just makes life so much easier, frankly, on Mo Williams, who can go off and do his own thing. And then at the same time, it makes things easier for Mark Pope as well. I talked about it after Ryan Hampton committed. However, it needs to be reiterated. Adding great players to pair with your great X's and O's will create success. If you add the right guys with the right coach, the smart coach here, the X's and O's guy, Mark Pope with his great offense, you will see success. How much success, I'm not quite sure. However, I think it needs to be pointed out that pace for Kentucky this upcoming season is a huge part of whether or not the Cats are able to rack up enough wins for Big Blue Nation to be happy. It's not just about recruiting and the talent that they've added to this roster. It's about their style of play. Let's talk about how important pace is. We've already discussed it a little bit, but I want to take a look at last season and take a look at some of the best teams in this conference. And it's pretty obvious the Cats got to go fast if they want to win. We'll be breaking that down here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting, from the opening whistle to the final kick. Now FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked in to every match with every goal pays. You can bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals means more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. You can benefit from every single goal scored, from the opening whistle to the final kick on FanDuel. Let there be goals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate you all watching here live on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, would love it if you did so. We've talked about how important Jamal Crawford could be. If he were to be added to this staff, how important he would be for this Kentucky team and the future of this program to actually recruit at the level that they need to sustain success in the way that they need to. The second thing here, we'll pause for water. Appreciate almost 100 of y'all in here. Dang, I did not expect that. It's for this upcoming season. It's not just about the recruiting. It's not just about the talent that Kentucky has acquired. Yeah, Momcilovic is awesome. Yes, Diallo and Wilkins should be a lot of fun. Marino coming back is great. It's not just about the players. It is about the pace. It is crucial for Kentucky's success. We're going to talk numbers here, so just brace yourself. When you go and look at KenPom, if you're like me, you like to look at adjusted tempo. You like to look at the fastest teams in the nation. 17 of the top 25 adjusted tempo teams in the nation, so 17 of the top 25 fastest, also ranked inside the top 50 nationally in field goal attempts per game. So what that basically means is almost all of the faster teams, the teams that played the quickest, also got the most amount of shots up because they naturally just had the ball more. They had more possessions leads to more field goal attempts, more likely than not leads to more points leads to more success. That's sort of the philosophy. Michigan this past season won a national title, I believe ranked 17th nationally in adjusted tempo out of 360 plus teams. They were flying up and down the floor. They had a really good rebounding team. They did not turn the ball over. And so all of those factors led to very efficient, dominant basketball where they were blowing teams out of the water, scoring a ton of points, flying up and down the floor. But 4 of those 17 teams that were chucking a lot of shots up and flying up and down the floor were Power 5 schools, just 4 of them, most of them being mid-majors. But the cool thing about those 4 is that 3 of those teams were SEC schools who all happened to average almost 90 or above 90 points per game. Georgia, Arkansas, and Alabama. It's interesting that 4 of those teams there out of the quickest in the nation that were getting shots up come from this league, and all of them were scoring a ton. And all of them happen to have an effective field goal percentage of 53.9 or higher in SEC play. They had a really solid three-point rate of 36.6% or higher. They did not get to the charity stripe. They ran up and down the floor, and they got shots up. For context here, Alabama was 5th nationally in pace. Georgia was 12th. Arkansas was, I believe, 18th, if I'm not mistaken. All of those teams were getting up at least 64.5 shots per game. Really cool that 3 of the teams in our league have already adopted this philosophy. Georgia did not have the talent to consistently win in the SEC, but Alabama and Arkansas did. And the threshold here, the cutoff here I had for the top 25 teams in adjusted tempo, maybe it's not fair because Florida was like top 30, and they won a lot in this league by playing fast, and so it's marginal, kind of what I'm with my cutoff point here. It's not that important. I guess marginal is not the right word. I guess I don't think trivial is the right word either. I can't think of the right word here, but you understand what I'm saying. Some of the fastest teams in the country reside in this league, score a lot of points, and won a lot of games in this league a season ago. We are seeing the league's best offenses aggressively push tempo and pace, and it came with success. The 3 highest teams in conference-only tempo were the top 3 teams in the SEC standings last season: Florida, Alabama, and Arkansas. The teams that were pushing the ball up the floor were the best teams in the league. The teams that were playing the quickest won more games. It is very simple. It's very simple for Kentucky. If they can get their 2 backcourt creators of Zoom Diallo and Alex Wilkins to go high volume on even just average efficiency, their scoring combined with the sharp shooting of Kam Williams and Milan Momcilovic and the anchor that is Malachi Marino around the rim will save Kentucky's offense. Kentucky, on paper, should win. Not a lot, not an insane amount of games relative to a season ago. They won't push like 32, 33 games. They won't have 10 more wins than they did in the horrific season that was last year. They could, but I'm not projecting that. But what I will tell you is that they almost certainly will win more because they have the personnel and now the philosophy to go out and execute the way that Mark Pope wants to. As long as they stay healthy, knock on wood, Kentucky should fly up and down the floor. They should spread teams out. They should look more like an Alabama, an Arkansas, or a Florida in terms of their pace and their aggression, and they should score a lot of points. Plus, they just got the best shooter in the nation who has the best gravity in the country. It's going to make things a little bit easier for everybody else. This, on paper, works. It makes a ton of sense. Now, their offense might not save their defense, which we'll get to here in a minute. But at least Kentucky's floor, in my opinion, is a little higher because, as we have said, very simple, more possessions, more points, more competitive. It has been proven by how this league has been going, how it went a season ago, and how I expect it to go this season. It's the same coaches running the same stuff. Kentucky needs to throw their hat into the mix and start putting their foot on the gas. That is my take on Kentucky and their pace. I think it's very important. All right. Kam Williams and Kentucky's defense, I think, potentially could be underrated. I'm going to dive into why here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, I'll tell you guys about our friends over at Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Workplace chaos can show up fast. Deadlines are stacking up, projects need attention, and on top of everything else, you're trying to fill an important role. The problem is that finding the right candidate can take a lot more time than most businesses can afford. So that's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in for you. They actually help you reach candidates who fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. So you're spending less time sorting through applications here and more time talking to qualified people who can help your business succeed. Some of the best moves organizations can make aren't exactly the splashiest ones. Sometimes it's finding the person who fits exactly where and when the team needs them at the right moment. That's what stood out to me here at Locked On Kentucky, getting some people on board to help me with the show. And it's the same idea behind Indeed Sponsored Jobs, helping connect organizations with candidates who are the right fit from the start. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need a right person to cut through the chaos, it's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, it's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate everybody in the live chat watching here. Subscribe if you have not already. I would really appreciate it if you did that. Going to pause one more time for water because goodness knows we all need it. Kam Williams might be undervalued now. I think he really could be. We're not talking enough about what Kam Williams does for this team this season paired with Milan Momcilovic. Because yes, I think that his offensive value is great as a three-point shooter who can split the floor with Momcilovic and be the guy who's probably going to be the recipient of a lot of wide open corner threes, frankly. Kam's going to get a ton of those. He's going to get his. But I think that his defensive value and what this team does as a whole on that side of the ball could be a little undervalued. There's a reason why Evan Mia projects this to be a top 15 unit. There's a lot of people that have concerns about Kentucky's defense, myself included. But you have to start thinking about the personnel we're working with here. First of all, Kentucky's going to easily be one of the tallest teams in the country. Easily. Like one of the 15 tallest teams in the nation. That's simply just going to cause problems for opposing offenses. You aren't going to be able to consistently score based on your personnel against a team that is just simply so much bigger than you. Kentucky also, theoretically, should have better shot blocking this upcoming season. My expectation is for Malachi Marino to be a better rim protector than he was a year ago, and he's already a pretty good rim protector. He is being backed up by one of the best shot blockers in the nation, one of the best in Frank Kepnang. So Kentucky has a great 1-2 punch at the 5 that can protect the rim. That should be better than anything Pope has had in a very long time. They have one of the tallest teams in the country. They have better just rim protection overall. If you can stop the ball at the rim and you can score in transition, you're going to be winning a lot of games. And I expect Kentucky to do both of those things at a pretty high level. Maybe not as consistently as we would like, but game in and game out, you're going to see it. You're going to see conceptually. And as the season goes on, my expectation, as long as Kentucky stays healthy, knock on wood, as long as they stay healthy, they will only get better at it and more comfortable with each other. But let's take this back to Kam Williams. Why is he so important in this Kentucky defense? Well, he was in the 98th percentile in court impact last season. When he was on the floor, he was very impactful as a 3-and-D player. He was 95th percentile in defensive Bayesian performance rating. He was one of the best defenders in the country. He was very impactful for his position, and he was very impactful as a defender at his position. The only player over on Evan Mia's website that I think might be overvalued on defense is Momcilovic because his BPR is like a 2.06 or something like that. I think it's simply because of his surroundings at ISU. That's arguable, but I think that that's why. Him as an individual defender, I have questions about. So Kam being able to play at the same time as Momcilovic makes a ton of sense for Kentucky's defense. And it helps them out in a huge way because while you have arguably the best offensive weapon in the country, you have questions about whether or not he can stop the ball if somebody wants to try and drive past him. Guess what? Switch. Switching matchups between the 3 and the 4 theoretically should be very easy from game to game. Let Kam take Momcilovic's assignment, and if Kam can't handle it, let Njai take the assignment. Let McBride take the assignment if you need more muscle. If you need more height, it's Njai. If you need a well-rounded guy, it's Kam. Just switch and let Momcilovic roam with another player that is not as versatile or not as quick. If another team happens to have a really good 3 and 4, maybe you just have to live and die with the 3 and say, okay, we're just going to try and outpace them and outscore them. But game to game, you should consistently be able to play Williams and Momcilovic together and just watch the spacing work on offense and then let Kam take the tougher defensive assignment, whether it be the 3 or the 4. I think Kentucky would be smart to play these two at the same time when they run into difficult defensive matchups. McBride is probably not defending at the level Kam can, and Momcilovic is going to need a break consistently because of the athleticism that he's going to find himself working against. So if you want to look at it this way, instead of the way that I've been looking at it, where I say Momcilovic starts at the 3, McBride starts at the 4, or you just flip that, they're starting on the wing/forward spots, right? Whatever. Just be hypothetical in whatever way you want to do this starting 5. You could look at it that way and say Momcilovic and McBride are starting at the same time with Diallo, Wilkins, and Marino. Or you could say, no, Kam is actually going to start at the 3 like Mark Pope told us whenever he answered my question on social media a few weeks ago. It could be Diallo, Wilkins, Kam, Momcilovic, Marino, and that's one of the better defensive units Kentucky can throw out there consistently. Maybe that's the way they want to roll with it. I don't know, but theoretically it makes sense if you're trying to hide Momcilovic in a way. If I'm going to equate it to something here defensively of like, what do you mean by hiding a player defensively? Well, look at what's happening in the NBA Finals. The Game 4 is about to tip here in a couple hours. If you guys want to go check that out, it's going to be a ton of fun. Maybe do some things on FanDuel while that is happening. Jalen Brunson, starting point guard for the New York Knicks, is a terrible defender. I could probably get past him, and I'm not that athletic. He is just simply slow, does not take great angles defensively, is not somebody that you would see swiping at the ball a ton. He's small. He does not have a ton going for him defensively, and so what the Knicks try and do is they try to hide him and give him an easy assignment instead of having to play against the primary on-ball player, i.e. the other team's point guard, the other team's shooting guard. They will hide him on a wing type, a Champagny who is going to be not really moving a ton, not going to have the ball in his hands. When he does, he's going to be doing one of two things. He's going to be passing or shooting. He's not going to be trying to drive on you physically. And so they hide Jalen Brunson that way. Let's put him on an easier matchup where he is more stationary, doesn't really have to do a ton, and we'll just let our other guys work with our personnel and hope that it all works out defensively. And it has up until this point because they just took their first loss in over a month. So hiding JB has been fine. For Kentucky, I think it can be easy theoretically to hide Momcilovic, quote unquote, if he is a bad defender. If he's average, we just let him rock and just see if we can outscore everybody. But if that is a concern, cool. I think Kentucky's defense might be undervalued here because Kam can provide you such versatility in both ways that he can play the game. Kentucky should have a lot of success with their pace. They should have a lot of success on defense relative to years past. And if they are able to add Jamal Crawford, things get even better for recruiting in the future. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys enjoy the show. Subscribe if you have not already. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. Follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.